Welcome, everybody. This is Do You Even Live Here? We've got a lot of good things to talk about today. First, we're going to start with Martin Henson, a beacon voice and community activist who's going to get a proper introduction in just a moment. But then we're going to dive in a little bit about the sports happenings happening across our nation and state. So thanks for being here and really hope you enjoy this episode.
Welcome to another episode of the Do You Even Live Here podcast. My name is Preston Blakely. I'm the mayor of the town of Fletcher, and I'm here with my co-host Dalton George, who's the mayor of Boone, North Carolina. And we have a really exciting episode geared up for you all. We have some topics about sports, the UFC fight, and then we also have this really interesting guest, one of my favorite individuals who's written a lot of cool columns, Martin Henson. And Martin, we're glad to have you here today. Martin Henson is an advocate and is the founder of Be Men, which focuses on men's mental health issues, which I think is very timely because I think it's Men's Mental Health Month right now as well. He works as a restorative justice trainer and has written The Unfulfilled Promises of George Floyd and other columns as a beacon voice for Beacon Media, syndicated statewide, who we also partner with. So Martin, we're glad to have you here today, man.
Thank you. I'm gonna have to get that introduction printed somewhere because I felt good. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's awesome to have you on, Martin. I mean, as somebody that's read a lot of your work but not had a chance to sit down and chat, like I feel like that's an introduction you very much deserve for all the work you do. And I think you take a lot of complex issues and put them in a way that I think a lot of communities really can engage with and understand, which I think is awesome and really true to the Beacon model and also true to what we're trying to do here with the show, which is telling these stories. And so we have to ask you this question. I don't even think we gave you the heads up, so this is going to be a real curveball. But Martin, do you even live here? That's the name of the show. Where do you live? Tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you land there? What's it mean to live in your community?
Yeah, that was all good. I stay in Raleigh. I've been out here for 3 to 4 years. And I always say 3 to 4 because after COVID, time just gets a little weird. I don't know what it's like for other adults, but that's what it's like for me. Yeah, I live in Raleigh, man, and I love the area. It's a lot to do. I've gotten involved with down home North Carolina and Beacon because I feel like it makes sense to be invested in your community. But it's easy to live here. So, yes, I do live here. Yeah.
Martin, I'm kind of curious if you could tell us a little bit about your work with Be Men, but also your work around restorative justice. I was just but before we hit the record button, I was talking about one of your pieces that you wrote about restorative justice that I really geeked out about because it talked about Naruto, Sasuke, Vegeta, and so for folks that maybe don't watch anime, we're talking about the Naruto anime, but also Dragon Ball Z. So you can tell us a little bit about Be Men, but also your work as a restorative justice trainer.
Yeah, and shout out to you for reading that because I was just nerding out, and I was like, how do I put together some things that I like? I feel like I wrote it a couple years ago. First conversation I've ever had with anybody about it. So I appreciate that. I got some comments. I got a few comments. But my work
I
with
love
the
piece.
Thank you. And you'll hear when as I talk, all the things I care about, I find ways to advocate for. So it just intertwines. So my work with Be Men Foundation, I created an organization that advocates for Black men and creates support spaces for them. So I felt like it was a need. This is a long, winding path for what made me create it because I was living in Boston at the time. Me Too was happening. Initially, I said, hey, we need to gather men together to talk about what's happening with women. But then I was like, it might be kind of racist to gather Black men together to just talk about them as perpetrators. Like, maybe we should expand this out, and talk about all the things. And then I was like, where do Black men go to talk about their stuff? And then that's when I was like, oh, okay, so let's start a support space. So it really came from responding to the needs of the community and then finding out that Black men have needs too, which is obvious to me in some ways, but in my advocacy mind, I'm looking at everybody else. And that from there, we've been here for 8 years, doing support spaces every month, in person in Boston, remote. Anybody can join from anywhere, Black men specifically. And I also do a good bit of work with men in general, or advocacy and support around men. So yeah, that's the life-giving work. That's what I do every day. That's what I think about every day. it gets me going. And then the rest of the stuff just comes as the day moves along.
Yeah, I deeply appreciate that, particularly as a black man who, regularly goes to therapy and tries to take care of myself. I think we have a unique space in, and not only United States, right, but in the entire world, where I don't think there's a lot of spaces that exist for black men to just be simply human, right? And we're always
Yeah.
expected to be strong and successful, resilient, all the things, all that composed together at one time. And I think that those expectations that are placed upon us as black men, it really makes it really difficult for us to go out there and ask for help, or really just simply be vulnerable. So having those support spaces are just, so critical, and it creates opportunities for connection and building community. And so I deeply appreciate the work that you're doing.
Well, and if I can just add, I mean, holding that space, Martin, is so important, because I feel like, in this conversation about what men do wrong, and there's a lot of things that, the Me Too movement's a great is evidence of, right? Where men have failed and have encouraged, a culture that harms other people. But also, I don't feel like there's been a lot of a dialogue on what men should do. There's a lot of what they shouldn't be and what they shouldn't do, but there's not a lot of good conversations about what they should do. And I think that that's put, people that are coming of age or becoming a man, or young men in the situation where it's like, I've got this huge list of things not to do, and I don't really know what being a healthy man looks like. And so having those spaces, I think, is really incredible. And it shows kind of that long-term, I think, commitment to community building and looking out for your neighbor and fostering that, because it's, it's easy to know what not to do. It's really hard to know what to do, what being a healthy man looks like, what being a good role model looks like. And I think so many folks need that right now more than ever.
Yeah. And B-Man is such a beautiful space, because we had a guy, we have guys come in and we process what's going on in our lives. It's a cat. He just had a baby recently. He's been coming to B-Men since he started dating his wife, when they got married. And now we're talking about what it means to be a father. Like, this is over years of just being connected. So as it relates to the restorative justice stuff, a lot of when we get ready to talk about what our society needs, we start using the word accountability. Accountability has carceral implications, whether people invoke it directly or not. So accountability for me is being in a relationship. It's as a primary, we start by being in a relationship, and it's not responsive to whether you do something wrong. It's responsive to you as a humanity, and I'm caught up in that with you. And that's told, we in the Bible Belt, people know the phrase, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And my answer is always yes. Like, and not from a biblical standpoint, but from a responsibility to the people in my world. Like, yes, I am just as alive as you are, and I can hold space for you, and we can hold space for each other. So the thing of what we're attacking and moving against these sort of negative portrayals of masculinity, the inverse of that is being connected and being warm and soft and caring and loving and all this, stuff that feels corny, but we all need.
Yeah. And Mark, you mentioned restorative justice. Just for our listeners, what is restorative justice? How do you define that? What does that look like?
Restorative justice. Now, I'm going to be real with you. When I talk to people and I tell them I do restorative justice, most of the time you can see their eyes kind of gloss over a little bit. And I know I have about 2 to 3 seconds to say what I need to say before they've, ignored whatever else is coming out of my mouth. So I'll say the simplest definition I can give is that it's an alternative to punishment. So where when something goes wrong, it's more than just a reactive response. It's an intentional way of building community and practicing vulnerability so that everybody's connected and responsible to each other when we're thinking about what type of world we want to be in. And then when problems come up, we can lean into that to be able to solve them.
So well put. I will say, Martin, I relate to that. Anytime I tell people I work in politics or I'm an elected official, that's the immediate eyes glaze over to. And I'm like, how can I convince you that I'm cool and not a terrible person in the 2 seconds I have? Well, and to your, I want to talk about this, and we're about to move on to a little bit on some of the columns that you're working on. But Preston started talking. He was alluding to, Sasuke and Vegeta. I actually have not read that column. I've read some of your others, but my understanding, I'm going to take a stab at it, that you were writing about those characters from that lens of restorative justice as folks that, are ultimately redeemed, even though they've done some bad things. Is that true? And I mean, would love to hear further thoughts on it, because I have a Dragon Ball take that ties to this that I would love to say to both of y'all.
Yeah, let's get into it. So restorative justice is a derivative of indigenous peacemaking. So indigenous people, my learning arc comes from indigenous communities up in Canada. And the peacemaking idea is that we're having a worldview where we're interconnected, and everybody, there's no necessarily, and from this particular view, there's not a sort of like right and wrong. There's just perspectives. And we can focus on making the world better by fixing harm to the degree possible. So as it relates to, Sasuke and Vegeta, they are allowed to redeem themselves. I honestly would have threw Sasuke out a long time ago. Sasuke is terrible. Just a violent. He had a period where he was just incredibly violent, just on some other stuff.
Right. But, yeah, he was messing up the whole world.
Man, he was just. But the part of the story that I found so different and so present in anime is that villains they're allowed to be human, and they're allowed redemption. And so with Vegeta, we have this thing where Goku beating up all of his friends, and then they become a part of his group, and then they go like defend the world. And Sasuke runs off, for folks who aren't familiar with the anime. Sasuke is recruited by like a kind of pedophilic dude, for lack of a better word. He was a very strange man who recruited children.
Yeah, he's a groomer. Yeah, he grooms him.
Are we referring to Orochimaru?
Yes.
Who they also forgive too quickly. The fact that Orochimaru lives in the village in Boruto blows my mind. But go ahead. That's another story for another day. That's somebody.
Wait, what happens? Okay, I'm not
Orochimaru's chill. Okay. Well, kind of chill. Anyways, go ahead, Martin.
Yeah. Like, he's groomed by this guy who wants to do nefarious things and goes out and destroys villages and tries to kill people. I don't think he actually kills anybody when you really think about the story arc. Or maybe like off-screen people that die in his way, but none of the like significant figures. But anyway, he's pulled back by the power of friendship from Naruto, which is the main character. But the fact that he's allowed to be redeemed, it was really important, and I thought connected to restorative justice, because anime has a lot of arcs that give people the ability to make things as right as possible. So by the end of the series, Sasuke has become a protector of the village. And so that's that thing, and talking to so many people in anime where they can cite some personal values that they've gathered from watching these shows. And I was like, let me put these two things together and just tell people my thoughts.
So well put. Well, I mean, and to the Vegeta point, right? Like, I mean, the world would have ended a long time ago had Vegeta not teamed up with like Goku and Co.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a really amazing way to look at those characters as kind of an example of what community can do and relationships can do. And the only thing I was going to build on, and this is my take, I think about this a lot. As a kid, I thought Raditz was so cool. Raditz is a Dragon Ball Z character. And Goku's brother, cool. Like biological brother. That's his hair was cool. I was young. I was like, that guy's awesome. And he's the first Saiyan that comes, and they kill him, right, in a fight defending the Earth. And you wonder, like, this is like their blood. This is his blood brother. How different it would be if they could have had that conversation. Probably a lot less evil or whatever you want to say on the front end than Vegeta was. And I think about that all the time, man, how different Dragon Ball would be if they had another Saiyan helping them out. But
Yeah.
it's a great example of lost opportunity, and in that case, an actual relative of the main character Goku, and then Vegeta, somebody that's redeemed and contributes a lot. And so I'd never thought about it that way until y'all started talking about it before the show starts. But big Raditz fan, so I always think about that. Sorry, Preston, I cut you off.
Oh no, I deeply agree. That's a great point, Dalton. I hadn't thought about it because, the way the series started to go, I mean, when different Saiyans start to pop up, I mean, they're Super Saiyan just like that. So like to have like another Super Saiyan there too, I mean, I think that really just kind of encapsulate building community, right? Because, Goku really helped everybody to become a Super Saiyan. And, we're talking about Vegeta's kind of redemption arc too. But I mean, to have, Raditz there and have his redemption arc perhaps, along with a lot of other characters. I mean, we're talking about building Dragon Ball Z community there, right? That's honestly much stronger, right? Much better. Protects the Earth.
Better odds against Cell if they had Raditz and Nappa and all these people that were able to contribute the same way, So
That's
it
right.
actually minimizes harm in the long run. It's kind of funny to use that as an example of what some of that restorative approach would be in that setting.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
the other thing, Martin, I'm thinking about as you're speaking, just kind of related back to black men. I mean, in particular, and I kind of alluded to this before, but there's such a need for support spaces for black men, right? And I think restorative justice really shares that same goal, right? And so I think one of the things that, I think we often overlook, and you clearly are one of those people, but is that people need connection, right? Like
Right.
they need connection, they need mentors, they need that accountability piece, right? That place where you can heal and grow. And I think, particularly when we think about like the male loneliness epidemic, isolation is more needed connection is more needed than ever now, right? When we have that isolation, and isolation really rarely provides, positive outcomes, and community provides those positive outcomes. And so deeply appreciate that work.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and so I know for the folks listening, you're like, okay, well, they're talking about anime. Geez, buckle up because we're pivoting into UFC now. So somewhat in the same realm. But Martin, there's been a lot of conversation. This episode, we're going to dive into sports. There's been a lot of things going on in the sports world, right? Some hype around the Stanley Cup, a great NBA Finals, and then also a very unique UFC event hosted on the White House lawn. And I understand you're writing a column about it, but I'm curious as to kind of what your thoughts are on the message that's being sent by the White House through that event, and kind of what thoughts you're trying to articulate in that column that you're working on.
Yeah, the column is really the mess of it all around American celebrations, how caught up in it we are. Because I think a lot about what liberalism is and what conservative, how we think of conservative people in this world. And I think as a society, we're like all complicit because we believe we're fighting for justice, but we still have an American view of what justice is relative to the rest of the world. So that's in my mind. I'm watching it because the fan in me is like, oh, they're fighting outside. Yeah. Yeah. So as a mixed martial arts fan, you had the pride events that would happen in Japan. They were big. Before the UFC, that was one of the major promotions. Now the UFC is the primary go-to organization for mixed martial arts fighting. But back in the 2000s, Japan had that. You see the big arenas, and they're looking in from. You can see this view from the very back where this ring is in the center. So the fan in me is saying that. The critic in me is saying, man, this is really what white supremacy looks like. And it's incorporated itself into hyper-masculine blood sport. And we're going to celebrate it because we're Americans,
Right.
So and I'm paying for it. We're all paying for that.
Yeah.
That event. Now, these two things don't sit equally in my mind. I'm definitely more of an activist, more of a critic, but I like watching the fights. And so I'm using my relationship to the contradiction in the articles. I say, oh, we're like that. We have this idea that when Trump does something that frames America in this way that we feel shameful about, that's over there. That's them. That's not my president. But everything about America has been reflective of these sort of things. Even as we think about, for the longest period of time back in slavery and a little bit afterwards, where they would have black men come and they would be blindfolded and they'll get in the ring and fight for money. And they might get $20 or some change that they need because they're poor and they got to fight. So there's all of these things are just swirling for me. So those are my entry level thoughts about the event on the White House lawn.
Yeah, I love that commentary, Martin, because for one, I'm not anti-sports. We talked about my love for the Panthers and the Hornets and a lot of other sports teams. And shout out to the Hurricanes for just winning the Stanley Cup. And so I deeply love sports, and I think sports really do bring people together. So I think about like the World Cup right now. I think it really brings people together. The Olympics really bring people together. Like I've never felt more patriotic in my life than watching Steph Curry go crazy on the court and hit all those threes. And I'm like, holy
Amen.
Cow! Like I'm American as it gets right now. Like that got me excited. But and I'm not a UFC fan or a combat sport fan really, but. And I guess my question is like, I don't think like it really brought people together. Like if we're celebrating America's 250th anniversary, I'm not sure what role that UFC had to play there. Like I don't know how it brought people together because I didn't get that same patriotic feeling that I got again when I saw Steph Curry like shooting threes and everybody kind of celebrating together. That's not what it felt like, and particularly so when we get to the end of it and. Former First Lady Michelle Obama catches, a stray comment that's wildly inappropriate for entirely no reason. And if this is a celebration to really bring people together, when we have commentary like that, when we don't really have that really patriotic feeling, I'm not sure that it was successful. And so I'm kind of curious about what your thoughts are about, the ability to bring sports to bring communities together. I mean, you even think about like Friday Night Lights at your local, football high school football team. Everybody's there and it's brought together like dozens of hundreds of thousands of people right all across the nation, but I'm not sure they succeeded at the fight.
I don't think that was the goal. Sports is in many ways a simulation of violence that we can't consistently engage in and have the type of society that we want. So you watch the fight, and there's all these different montages of wars. They have some clips of Reagan in there. They talk about the War of 1812. I'm like, why are they talking about this? I actually don't. And it's all conquest and dominance. It doesn't feel like celebrating America. It feels like we are the most violent, and we won. So fuck everybody else. We're going to pull out all the veterans. We're going to show you all the military. We're going to play some rock music a lot. We're going to show Trump. Trump's in cage side. So the idea that this is supposed to be some sort of celebration of or bringing people together, the White House showed birth of a nation 100 years ago.
All right, that's right.
And this felt like a show, almost like a show of military strength. That's the closest thing I can put it towards. So the sport part was more in the background for me than this is like, I'm powerful. I do what I want. I dominate. All of my enemies will suffer. I will watch people bleed because I want to. And that is Trump. And the dominance of lesser people is American. Because you also have fighters on there that's brought out to lose. From being a fight fan, the people are they're there to help the next guy get over. This is like in wrestling. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, this is, as I'm watching it, before you get to the two main fights, I was like, oh, this is what's happening. These guys are coming here to get beat up. So I don't know who it brought together. I know I was watching as a fight fan, but less so as an American in my mind. But when I reflect on it, I'm like, oh, this is America.
I'm curious. I'd like to pose this question to y'all because it's interesting. I mean, so sports have been involved in political discourse, whether they like it or not, for a number of years now. And you think of the LeBron
Which are
James shut up and
political.
dribble,
Yeah.
all of the NFL hate that players got for
Colin
kneeling,
Kaepernick. Yeah.
Colin Kaepernick. But the great irony is like, there was never a point like Obama never had his own basketball game played on the White House lawn where they all celebrated Obama and made fun of, you know what I mean? Like it never got to that level. But the outrage, as y'all remember, was actually, incredible. Even just, kneeling at the beginning, or LeBron just talking about politics, being an athlete. But then you have this event where, you say something, quite frankly, it's just racist about Michelle Obama, right? Because you're just hateful and ignorant. And you're platformed in that way. And this is an entirely political event. And all of a sudden, actually sports, it's okay for sports to be political now because they benefit our means. And it's also not lost on me, right, that a lot of the dialogue previously with sports that was controversial were related to black justice issues. And that was when the outrage came out, right? But now it's, if we're being hateful, if we're centering a political candidate, that's okay. And so I think for me, I've grappled with that since, is that, the same people that have told us, well, I don't want you to make my sports political, to Martin's point, you like combat sports, you like watching UFC, and now you can't separate enjoying UFC from, to your point, what is like this fascist or fascist adjacent display of strength to celebrate the president's birthday. It's never happened before. And there's some real beautiful irony about that. And also the real absurdity.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough because I'm sitting there. First of all, the UFC, we can go into boxing and just talk about boxing a little bit. The Great White Hope, just to frame this, came from the idea that white men are just innately superior to black boxers. And so they would bring someone in, I believe his name was Jim Jeffries, to beat Joe Louis. They needed somebody to beat him. It's either Joe Louis or the first black heavyweight champion. Either way, this idea that a white fighter to show power has been a theme throughout combat sports, very specifically for a long time. Even if you think about Floyd Mayweather's rise, like he became the heel because he's a successful black boxer, and that he realized that was going to make him more money than being Pretty Boy Floyd. Now, the UFC has, in terms of the sport, and then I'll bring it out wider, they've been playing with real racist stuff for a long time. Seeing all types of crazy stuff about Brazilians, and every 4 or 5 years, they get somebody who has this sort of WWE level shtick that they're trying to run that's always racist. Always. And mixed martial arts is notoriously militaristic and conservative. Because a lot of these guys, they go out and train police officers and they train armed services. So like that element wasn't surprising for me because I've been dealing with it as a mixed martial arts fan. Actually, I've seen more threads of a little bit of progressive ideas, which I didn't think was ever going to be a thing, come through. So I'm watching it, and it's on. My daughter just happens to be in here eating at the time it's on, because she's no stranger to this. I've been watching this stuff forever, since she was a baby. And Josh Hoke runs that line about Michelle Obama being a man while she's in the room. And we have a conversation about it. And I'm like, I'm explaining to her how the event itself is racist. Like this is how you know, because it's a lot of American iconography, and there's a lot of military people, and they're not racist separately, but when you kind of get them together and you get people talking in this way, and you get people all the Christian nationalism, because another thing that happened when everybody got on the mic and they said, thank God and thank Trump, some version of both actually happened, which is more than typical. So all these things come together. This guy gets on there, and I'm trying to explain to her why he said Michelle Obama is a man, why he felt comfortable enough to say that. And at the same time, and you'll see this as in the piece that I'm writing, I don't explain well why I'm still watching it. And so that's the spectacle of violence and racism and all the things that Dalton you're referencing, these contradictions, like they're all like happening
Right.
at the same time.
Yeah, and to your commentary about the Great White Hope, and thinking about like Jack Johnson, I watched something on it once, and they were talking about. I'm not sure if people are familiar with the Mann Act, but
Mm-hmm.
Jack Johnson was historically really known for liking women, particularly white women,
Right.
and they ended up. When I say they, I mean Congress ended up passing the Mann Act, which I think essentially combated prostitution and the interstate transportation, I guess, with women. And so this was somebody that was very wealthy and drove really nice cars and had really nice clothes. And so, at this time where it was seen as inappropriate for, well, not even inappropriate, unlawful for
Mm-hmm.
Jack Johnson to be with a white woman, they passed the Mann Act. And Jack Johnson was somebody that was, to your point, he was in the ring
Yeah.
and they could not beat him.
Right.
And I think, one of the ways that they did try to beat him, right, was to come up with this Mann Act. And
Yeah.
I think this is something that's still on the books today, right? But I think it has a lot of racist roots to it, and
Yeah.
it was to combat Jack Johnson, Jack Johnson's dominance in the boxing ring.
Mm-hmm.
Not know
Yeah.
that. Well, and you
Yeah.
even got, I mean, to the Great White Hope dynamic. I mean, I had never heard that in the boxing space. I'm sure. I mean, it makes total sense that it was there, but I always hear it from the Larry Bird angle, where
Yeah.
Larry Bird versus Magic, and and Larry Bird, to his credit, was like, "Don't make this a race thing for me. Like, I just like to play basketball. You guys are making this really weird." Like,
Yeah.
but just kind of infusion of political identity in two people that, even though they were rivals, were like really good friends. It's like Magic and Larry had a good relationship and were friends. Like, to them, it was not this kind of, Larry wasn't playing basketball to show that white people were better at playing basketball, right? He was playing basketball because he liked to play basketball, and this infusion of it, but it becomes even more troubling when the athletes embrace it and the culture embraces it. And that's kind of to your point about some of this stuff in the UFC. And I think that's when it becomes even more dangerous. I mean, could you imagine a world where Larry Bird didn't try to shut that down when that narrative started, right? It was just like, what's wrong with you guys? Like, how toxic it would have made, basketball of that era. And it's just, that's the most troubling parts of sports. And then also the most hopeful parts of sports are like the ability to throw your lot behind something. To your point earlier, Preston, about the Olympics, like tennis, my favorite tennis player is Tiafoe, who is an American. And when you're a tennis player, you've got an American flag next to your name. And I think that's awesome, to see somebody with class being able to represent your nation on that scale, and kind of be above the fray. And so it's really fascinating to see it on both angles.
Yeah. And it's like so as Americans being for me being black, I got to figure out how I'm supposed to make peace with that, because for me, what we're getting ready to celebrate as a country, the July 4th, my July 4th is Juneteenth, and it has always been.
Yeah.
And to be forced to pay for this event to commemorate the violent, imperialistic, the eradication of indigenous people that allowed America to exist, the transatlantic slave trade that stripped me of my history, the countless international conflicts that we're in every year. We have to find new justifications for. And then I'm American. And then you have, but when Sha'Carri is running in the Olympics in the 4x4, all that stuff kind of fade to the back, because I'm like, I need you to get this, because you're proud of her advancement and being able to represent a country that denied your existence as a full human 100 years ago. So I try to talk about it without giving a declaration. And I also want to notice part of our complicity in this system is that, of course, it was an incredibly racist and an example of misogynoir that Michelle Obama will be targeted for that. In a week, there'll be something different that people are mad about. And now it's good enough for us to say, you shouldn't have done that. And in a week, we'll be on to something else. And that's the thing that feels as American as oppression is, it's also very American in the Black extent to be resistant. So, and they live in the same room.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And to your point about, Shaqiri, I mean, and when I brought up Steph Curry, that was my feeling too, right? And it's like, man, Steph's looking like the best basketball player on the planet, and I want to see him win because, all the advancements that we've had in our nation, and again, it's a flawed nation that has a lot of issues, a lot of oppression, a lot of hate, and we have a long way to go still. But to see him make those advancements and represent Black folk on the stage, it's like, and Martin, I think you'll appreciate this. It's like when we're watching like Family Feud and we see the Black family up there, and I don't know if your family's like my family, but like when we're watching Family Feud, we're like, man, come on, y'all, do better. Like we want to see you win at Family Feud to the Black family. I mean, it's whatever, whoever wins. But there's always like that commentary, like, oh, we want them to win. And so definitely hear that. And then thinking about too, because sports do bring people together, but I get incredibly frustrated when, and we've had this conversation today, but when we're thinking about like Colin Kaepernick, right, and LeBron James, and to your point, Dalton, about shut up and dribble, or keep your politics out of football or basketball, right. But UFC is allowed to do this. But it's like, it brings up the question, like, who is actually allowed to protest, right? Who is actually allowed to use their voice? And more oftentimes than not, it's not Black folk, right? You see Black folk in the street, protesting, and George Floyd being murdered, and it gets received with comments like, "Go to work," you know what I mean? Why aren't you at work? I'm like, so who is allowed to protest? But when I go to the Pride Festival in Henderson County, and I see the other side of folk out there protesting, I'm like, well, why doesn't that same commentary exist for you? Why aren't you at work?
Yeah.
Well, and Martin, you brought up Juneteenth. I know that you're also working on a column on that. And I also know that this is a really fraught time, right, where Juneteenth is being relitigated. People want to attack the institution that is Juneteenth, the reason to celebrate. And I will just note for the folks listening, and I grapple with this a lot. I'm younger, right? I'm 27. My family was not political, grew up pretty poor in North Carolina. Folks didn't vote. And, as somebody that's formed my political kind of identity, starting at like 14, 15, this has been a really interesting time to watch things that felt settled, Juneteenth, Pride Month, right? Not being openly homophobic, not being openly racist, on the Michelle Obama thing, that once kind of felt, I don't want to say soft. I know that this was always, the warts were always there, but a little bit more, okay, dude, have some class, right? Are now being relitigated to where politicians feel comfortable attacking Juneteenth, attacking Pride Month, and so on. And that pendulum swing has been really, this is the first time I've kind of felt it, has been really troubling for me to watch people that, 2 or 3 years ago were posting black squares on their story, or I guess now 6 years ago, time flies, to your point about COVID. And now they're, reposting things about Juneteenth not being real. It's the pendulum has swung, and these attacks are ever more common. So curious as to what that column is exploring, and also how you're navigating this new moment where people feel okay relitigating and really attacking this holiday.
Yeah, well, we celebrated Juneteenth before it was ever a national holiday, before it was ever recognized as anything. I never had a conversation with white people about Juneteenth until maybe the past 5-6 years.
Yeah,
right.
It's like our little thing, and now they want to cancel it, but we've always been celebrating it. It gave us the federal holiday in 2020.
Yeah.
I want to say 2020. Okay.
Yeah, it's something like that.
I mean, if they take it back, I'm still not going to work on that day. I'm still going to be with my people. I'm not surprised. What I say often, America is still the country where slavery is legal by way of the 13th Amendment. If you are convicted of a crime, you are a slave. We can easily dismiss that because we don't have to think about it. The conditions of jails, people who are incarcerated, are the very conditions that we would ask for humanitarian intervention for another country. And it's happening in prisons that we can find in every state. We look away. You can name a country near you that hasn't been involved in some human rights abuses or scandals, Coca-Cola, Bank of America. You can just pick one and we look away. So that America is having to deal with its entrenched racism, prepping and planning to send conservative judges all the way up to the Supreme Court for the past 70 years, and they finally got there. I'm not surprised. And I've been telling people for a long time that we're going to be in the fight, and we're really fighting for our descendants. I'm fighting for my daughter. I'm fighting for her kids. By the time it gets to her kids, then we might be able to reverse some of these things happening in the Supreme Court, because those people are going to have long appointments. So right. I'm not just having a right now perspective of what justice is. I'm thinking about how they had to fight for justice. My ancestors, what was the ability to read was a radical thing at one point in time. And I want for the people in my future to be so far beyond this moment that if I were there to tell them, they wouldn't believe me. So I can't look at it as like, for me, can you believe this? I have to look at it as I have to do my job to make sure that the next people up have it a little bit easier than I did. Maybe that's like a pessimistic view, but that's kind of how I have to orient.
No, I deeply appreciate that worldview too, because when I think about like my great grandmother, right, who passed away in 2014, and so to have a great grandmother and grow up with her and pass when I'm a young adult is pretty it's crazy, right? And to have her live to see like Barack Obama be president. That was something, and I'm curious if this was true in your family too, but when you talk with some of the elders in your family or your community, particularly the Black community, they're like, I never thought that would happen. And it's like when he was there, taking the oath of office, I think every Black person in the world was like holding their breath because they're like, there's no way this man's going to make it out of there. Yeah. And so to your point, I mean, it's like this, just chipping away at it that takes so much longer than I think we actually, than we thought it would take. And there's so much work to be done. And again, it's like, even when we get to our descendants, when we talk about, I don't have a kid yet, but and I don't know how old your daughter is. I sometimes have that pessimistic view too. I don't know if we're going to be there. I'm not sure if justice is going to be fully, fulfilled, because we have such a long way to go, and those conservative justices are going to be there for a long time. I mean, we look at like the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act that have just been actively dismantled over the past couple of decades to where, we're at the point where it's hardly even existing, right? I mean, they're actively taking away, legislative districts across the nation and various states that were represented by Black folk. And, to have that representation taken away from us, I too sometimes feel that pessimistic view, when South Carolina is grappling with taking away Clyburn's seat, that's a big dang deal. And that's going to have some real impacts for folk, not only in South Carolina, but across our nation. And so I think your words of wisdom hold true to me and a lot of other Black folk across not only this nation, but this world, that we have a long way to go. And I hate to have that pessimistic view too, but there's a lot of chipping away that we still need to do.
Yeah.
And one thing I'll note, I mean, as we talk about obviously the Supreme Court and restorative, I mean, or systemic change, even here locally, right, at county commission levels, we were talking about this before we started recording. You've got county commissioners, local elected officials that are attacking, things like Juneteenth and delegitimizing them. And actually, one clip that went viral, the commissioner that was doing it, I believe, called a black man in the audience boy, telling him to be quiet, which, I mean, obviously carries such historical context and is just racist. And it goes to show that, we organize for justice at the Supreme Court level, but also we've got to pay attention to what's going on at these local chambers too, because wounds fester, and really call it out as it is. I know we're about to wrap up this segment, Martin. I know we're going to plug you towards the end, but want to give you an opportunity for any kind of final thoughts, and where can people find you and support your work and learn a little bit more about what you're doing?
Yeah, you can find what I'm doing with Black men and the support spaces that we build at the Men Foundation. You can follow my Substack at Martin X Speaks at Substack. You can look at my website, Martin H Speaks. I had the whole X and the H. I really wanted it to be Martin X, but it was taken at the time. But you can find Martin H Speaks and a lot of the things that I'm doing. Yeah, I'm out here. I'm invested in justice. I'm invested in working with men, building community, talking about the social justice issues, because I haven't forgot about George Floyd. I think about victims of police violence every day. So, yeah, hopefully I can be a part of the change we're trying to make.
Awesome. Thank you, Martin. And support Martin however you can. If you're in the area, link up. If you know somebody that would like to be involved with the Be Men group, this is your person. And continue to support your folks and your neighbors and be your brother's keeper, as Martin started the conversation really emphasizing. Welcome back, everybody. We just wrapped up a great conversation with Martin Henson, and we just want to kind of wrap up in the theme of talking UFC and the theme of talking a little bit about sports. It's been if you're a sports person, you've really been winning lately, right? We've got a number of things going on. We had a great NBA Finals. We'll chat a little bit about that. The World Cup's going on. Shout out. Neither of us watch a ton of it, though we're watching it a little bit, but just want to note that. And then also, right, our very own Carolina Hurricanes just brought back the Stanley Cup for the first time in 20 years. So we've been up. I follow a little bit of hockey. I don't know if I'd necessarily classify myself as a hockey fan. I did proclaim the day after Stanley Cup Celebration Day here in Boone, and I did so in part because of the cultural milestone that really the Hurricanes winning represents. And you think about what hockey was to the state in 2006. Preston and I were young guns back then. I was about 6 years old. Preston, how old were you?
Some of us were older than others. I was 11 going on 12.
So we were young men. Our producer was 63 at that point, so he remembers it well. He was in a newsroom. Shout out Jeremy Borden, executive director of Beacon and producer. He was 63 years old. He remembers it well, but we really didn't. And and like hockey as a concept wasn't talked about a lot there in North Carolina. The Stanley Cup, I think, in that playoffs push brought some attention to it. But you think about where we're at now, 20 years later. Both governors, Josh Stein, Roy Cooper,
true fans.
True fans. If you're in Raleigh, if you're a politician, you're talking about the Hurricanes. And also just like this embrace of what it is to like redneck hockey. I mean, like this embrace of redneck hockey has been really cool and meaningful. And to me, it's North Carolina over everybody. And so seeing us win on the big stage is what's most meaningful. And it was a great playoff. I mean, I watched nearly every game this playoff season, and ton of fun.
Yeah, I'll admit I'm not a big hockey fan, and this was my first kind of entry into the hockey world. Never been to a game. I'd never watched a game before on TV. I was never interested in it. But again, to our point in talking with Martin earlier, sports really bring people together, and seeing all the excitement that was happening in the state of North Carolina about the Carolina Hurricanes. How could you not jump onto the bandwagon? And so I watched all the games for the Hurricanes once they got a little bit farther in the playoffs. And it even got into like a little rivalry with the Nevada Assembly Majority Leader, who I met in Arizona a couple weeks ago. and she and I shared a couple DMs in her Instagram bio. She has like Night Super Fan or something like that, and so we had some friendly chatter about what was happening. Um, and I also now have a new favorite player for the Hurricanes, and so shout out Keandre Miller, who again we're calling this a redneck sport, but young black man playing hockey, was
Hey
really
man,
on the
I
fort.
believe that a young black man can also be a redneck. I don't think you need to count that out.
Oh,
A
how do we?
positive redneck.
Yeah, so we have to define a redneck. What's happening here? How do you play hockey?
Seriously,
What do we play hockey on, Dalton?
uh,
And she not yeah, she eyes.
no, it's yeah, we got to define. No, I just we're reclaiming redneck too. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that's
yeah.
like a southern thing. It's
Yeah,
yeah, we're reclaiming
but
it.
we're saying we're using it in colloquial terms,
Yeah,
right? And
exactly,
yeah, that's
exactly.
fine. But Miller was out there out in front during the George Floyd protest in 2020. He voiced his support for the Black Lives Matter movement. And he's doing this all in a space that you would think historically it doesn't happen in. So shout out
Yeah.
to him. Shout out to him being a new Stanley Cup champion. So shout out to North Carolina. I'm excited, man. Now the only thing that we need, I did not proclaim a day in Fletcher for the Stanley Cup championship, although we were very proud of them in Fletcher. But to your point, when the Hornets win, when the Panthers win, and next time the Hurricanes win, we will make sure to have that day in Fletcher, because I think those days are coming for the Hornets. I think those days are coming for the Panthers, and they're already there for the Hurricanes. So North Carolina sports are up right now.
Absolutely. Well, and I will know. I mean, Preston, I feel like you and I have kind of gotten a brand now as Panthers super fans in the
Yeah,
political space. I get asked that a lot. Oh, you go to Panthers games? I saw you at one with Preston. I mean, so I'm very excited to embrace that. And obviously, the Hurricanes are pretty far away. The great irony is we're actually closer to Charlotte than we are Raleigh, so it's a little bit easier to get down to those games for us.
that's
And
right.
so, not that Raleigh isn't important to me, but Charlotte sports obviously has a special place in my heart. And I yeah, I mean, I just that whole team's been really awesome. Bussy, really locking him down with a shutout in the
Yeah, turned up.
final game, and the coach Rod and Raleigh needs to name something after Coach Rod. If you're on Raleigh City Council, I don't know. And for the folks listening, write your mayor. Let's get a street named and something for the
Yeah,
Stahl brothers too, because Jordan Stahl was awesome, and Eric Stahl's role in the franchise, just two incredible folks. So, well, and Preston, I want to pivot a little bit because the NBA Finals, you and I, obviously Hornets fans, don't really have much to
yeah.
say about who we were pulling for. I will say I was cheering for the Spurs, and before all the Knicks listeners boo me, I was doing it. I could justify it because Bismack Biyombo, Hornets and
A
Bobcats
Charlotte
legend,
Hornet and Bobcat. Yeah, that's right.
really put in his time. And as the vet on the Spurs, I wanted to see him
Did he
get
get in
it
the
done.
game?
No, he didn't touch the court, but he's got that locker
Shout
room
out Biz
presence.
Matt Biombo, man. I
Shout
think he
out
was a
Biz.
I think he was a part of their, I don't know if you've seen like that little pregame dance thing. I want to say
Yeah.
Bismack Biombo is like front and center. He may not be the guy, but he's definitely like a big spirit, a big, I don't want to say cheerleaders. I feel like that diminishes his role on the team because he had a big role. The vets matter. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, he had a role there, So shout out Bismack Biombo. And two, I was also going for the Spurs. Um, I didn't really have a good reason. I mean, I guess I could steal your reason and say Bismack Biombo, but I will say I do like Wimby a whole lot. Just talk about Martin. We were
He's
talking
getting a
about,
lot of hate now.
he is getting a lot of hate now. He's becoming a villain. He didn't shake any hands, but
I know.
I don't know, man. It's the final. Sometimes he could be a sore loser. You think about all the people always remember the one moment, but I think about
Yeah.
him and like the Olympics and losing all these other times. He's been really graceful, man. The guy's cried when he's lost, and I think he's been a good example of men being able to show their emotions and trying to kind of chip away at toxic masculinity. He's done a lot of good things. He
Yeah.
give him back to the San Antonio community. But the Knicks won it. I'm happy for the Knicks. Jalen Brunson, shout out him, man. He's a dog, man. I was on the anti Jalen Brunson camp when New York gave him the big contract, and I never thought he could get it done, but heck, he's proved me wrong and the rest of the world wrong. So shout out to Brunson. His dad's there too. Really special moment. But Dalton, I think you have like a really hot take about the Knicks and local government, and
I
I want
do.
to hear the take.
I do. I might get in trouble. And I will just note one last thing. I mean, the reaction of the Spurs is this kind of reactionary nature of social media, and it feeds into politics too. But everybody's like tear the team down. Oh, they're sore losers and all this. And so many games they didn't blow a lead if that pass didn't roll off the back of Castle, right? If De'Aaron Fox would have held the ball, I mean, how different the series would be. And it just speaks to the fact that just a few moments, whether it's in politics, public life, sports, will tear down somebody. And I know that team will be back. Yeah, I mean, the Knicks, the whole time I've watched the Knicks and the reaction in New York, I've thought as a local leader, what a headache that would be, right? In terms of the destruction to public property. I mean, you saw people tearing trees down, busting bus windows out. And, you want to cheer for your hometown team. If you're the mayor of New York, you're cheering for the Knicks. I get it. But I can't help but wonder if you're on the team, if you're the police chief, were you probably like thinking, man, maybe it wouldn't be that bad if my own team lost? Because that's a lot of public money that goes into the cleanup. I mean, you think about the litter and everything. And when I was telling y'all this offline, y'all were like, you sound like such a narc. And don't get me wrong, like get into the streets, celebrate, do these things. I think when you're getting to the point where you're just like wrecking things to wreck things, it's like, come on, like to me, what's so cool about sports is it's one of the few times in life that you kind of can be proud of a little bit of tribalism, right? Like, just like, us versus them. And like, to me, the reason I cheer for Carolina sports is because I love North Carolina. And like, I want my community to be healthy and happy. I want North Carolina to be above the rest, like all of that. And so destroying things kind of counterproductive to that extent. I know that's not every Knicks fan, but I'm like, I bet somebody in the mayor's office was like, I kind of hope the Knicks lose because I don't want to deal with what it means to
clean up everything. I mean,
exactly.
Even with them just making the finals, I mean, if you get on Instagram or TikTok or any social media on a given day, it was mayhem up there. I mean,
Absolutely.
when we got hit in the head with the egg, that's mayhem. I don't think anybody deserves that. Did you see anything happening? And I'm genuinely asking this, as I didn't see. What were the celebrations like in Raleigh? I know they're going to have a parade pretty soon here, right? Do you know?
Yeah, it's some minimal celebrations. People were like climbing on signs and stuff, but like I don't think it was anywhere near the scale of like just destroyed stuff. People were just climbing around, acting crazy, which is fine. I mean, I think that's what you do. Like, if I was in Charlotte and the Panthers won the Super Bowl, like I'd be getting hype. I'd be screaming in the streets. People climbing on stuff, but definitely way more muted than New York.
Yeah, and I'll say I was in college when the Panthers made the Super Bowl last, which I think was 2016? Was that 2016, 2015, 2016?
Oh, that is nuts. I was like a sophomore in high school working at Pizza Hut getting yelled at by every employee. Or not employee, by every customer, because they're like, what do you mean my pizza's not ready? I'm like, bro, it's the Super Bowl. It's pizza. Everybody and their mom ordered pizza.
Dude, I was in college, and this was the time when the Panthers won. Krispy Kreme would give you like $1 dozen donuts or something crazy like that. I can't remember exactly what the deal was, but Krispy Kreme had some kind of deal when the Panthers won. And folks, if you remember, the Panthers were winning all season. And so anytime my friends and I would drive by the Krispy Kreme, I mean, the line would just be, ridiculously long. And to your point, when the Panthers didn't make the Super Bowl, my friends and I were like, listen, if the Panthers win it, we're driving down to Charlotte. Like we're going down there just to party and celebrate,
just to be a part of it.
Party and celebrate with community, man. It's it's never happened for our Panthers, but it's coming. But it never happened, and so we were prepared to go and celebrate and not cause any destruction because we care about our community. But we were there. We were ready to go have a good time.
Well, and that day will be coming soon. And one day in this thick of the sports events, we'll be the ones celebrating. And we'll note, as we talked with Martin, the UFC dynamics. One thing I want to end on, earlier the episode, I couldn't find a way to work it in, but it's something that's been rattling around in my brain, as far as the UFC dynamics, the politics of that, kind of if you are a UFC fan, but maybe not down with this current admin, it's hard to celebrate. And also talking about hockey, like when we won the gold this past Olympics, men and women, I was really hyped because that's like a USA thing. And like quickly my bubble got bursted by like people being really rude to the women's team, the president saying, oh, we've got to invite the women. And it just goes to show like how quick that can really rob a moment. And then Kash Patel, of course, being obnoxious in the locker room. I see that connection with the UFC thing and the Michelle Obama line where it's like some people just trying to watch UFC and enjoy it. And then we got to make it like gross and demean, somebody or say something racist or misogynistic or hateful. And it's just like, man, I just want to cheer for the teams that I love. And, if they individually want to talk politics, I don't think we should tell them to shut up and dribble, but we should hold that same energy when we're holding a political event on the White House lawn. That's my takeaway.
There you go. I agree 1000% with it. I mean, I think, again, like it's just I don't understand the Michelle Obama comment. I mean, it's racist, it's misogynistic, it's hateful, it's hurtful. And she's living they haven't been in the White House for 10 years. She's living rent free in their head, man, rent free. She's not been in the White House in a decade, and she's been pretty quiet. I think there's a lot of things to. There's a better moment there, right? We could have celebrated the Obama Presidential Library opening, which is a pretty dang big deal. I mean, it's a beautiful structure. It's gonna, I want to go visit it. I want to go see the things that are happening there. They're having a grand opening, I think, pretty soon. I mean, that's a big deal. That's something we could have raised up instead of insulting, our former first lady. And so that's a dang shame. And, nothing about that brought America together. And so I'm not sure whether we're celebrating Donald Trump's birthday or celebrating America 250. But regardless, that does not bring Americans together. If anything, it pushes us further apart.
Well said. I don't think there's a better way to end it. We had a great episode, y'all, and stick around for next week. But this has been Do You Even Live Here? I'm Dalton George. I'm a young mayor here in Boone, North Carolina. I'm with my co-host, Preston Blakely, another mayor in Fletcher. And this has been Do You Even Live Here, a podcast produced by Beacon Media. I also want to give love to Martin Henson, who participated. He plugged earlier in the show on how to find him. But check out his columns and support his work with B Men. Thanks for listening, y'all.